Wait, why would you have trouble handing out tissues? Okay, never mind. Forget I asked. The penultimate episode to this first season opened slightly melancholically with our heroines packing up their belongings and leaving the academy after their expulsions. I say slightly because for some reason, Nero's idea of an effective bag was her hat. Don't try to use hammer space if you ain't got it. Still, at least Cheryl saying farewell to the school was legit pretty sad. Meanwhile, the Phantom Thief Empire took the news pretty well, in particular on Renette. S-Def wishes she had this much depth to her character. With nothing left to lose, she decided to enact a final gambit to try and get Milky Holmes back on their feet. In the meantime, said magical girl detectives, I guess, tried to find work? I mean, Cordelia tried to sell flowers, while Nero... Nero, I think the crackhead a couple benches down says to lay off his customers. Cheryl managed to find relatively the most success working at a ramen restaurant, and I do put big emphasis on that relatively part. Fortunately, the G4, which, yes, even surprisingly included Kokoro, were there to at least try to be supportive in their own tsundere-esque ways. They also informed her how the Empire had upped their game by not only inviting more thieves to the city, but also changing their gimmicks with, I think, Rat adopting Chris Jericho's Painmaker persona as if he wasn't lame enough. But yeah, realizing their city was in trouble, Cheryl decided to track down and consult with her friends thanks to a laptop Saku left for her, which I guess would make the Luca cosplayer the hidden MVP of this finale, much like the actual Luca. Please don't tell me you got those from Kanai Ward. I mean, not gonna spoil anything about that game, but just remember that bow is kind of important for all sorts of reasons. Interestingly, the rest of the team did try to get other jobs, but they just didn't quite work out for various reasons. Cordelia couldn't handle working at McDee's and their poor upkeep, especially when there were blackouts, and Nero couldn't handle working at Denny's when the Karens arrived, so a perfectly valid excuse. However, while watching cameos that really wouldn't matter unless you played the PSP games, Arsene took over the airwaves to show Milky Holmes how they were holding Irene quote-unquote hostage. Now, at first, I figured that she was just using her illusion toys to make it look like she had kidnapped herself in an Eisen-level play, but no, even though she probably would have been capable of it, 20 used his disguise toys to impersonate her, while Irene actually was hanging on by some little threads, albeit in full control of them. This is likely her way of solidifying her resolve in getting her arch-rivals to return, and of course was more proof of why she's the real main character of this show. Though, as for said rivals...
Well, we're boned!
However, with no help in sight, as the G4 proved to be a bunch of jobbers, Cheryl finally realized what she and her team needed to do. You know, a couple of weeks ago, this girl might have made for a good motivational speaker for Sora. But yeah, jokes and sillier tone aside, this is actually a fairly well done rising from the ashes scene, with Cheryl making a bunch of callbacks across the season to get her team motivated. Just no one tell them what Mary and Kate's actual occupation is. And the callbacks just kept rolling out, as after it was pretty clear that they wouldn't be able to make it all the way to the mountains from the city, Irene just kind of came out of nowhere to give them a ride. Then again, that was nothing compared to some random delivery boy coming in to just give them more stuff, which was hilarious due to the absurdity of it all at least. Anyway, they got a ring from Sonia filled with the power of her toys that Cheryl could at least use once since they had similar power sets. They also got a wedding gift from Princess Clarice. Hey, still better pairing than Harry and Meghan. Fortunately, this was followed up by easily the best gag in this episode, with the thieves not even reacting to the arrival of Milky Holmes. Yeah, they actually saw Kokoro's gang as the bigger threat. The only thing that actually got them to react was some petty name-calling, or in Rat's case, incorrect naming. Regardless, this gave Cheryl an opening to save Henriette, who was more elated than anything else, in seeing her one true rival returning. because for her, it meant that she could corner the pink detective a little more just to draw out her powers. Thus, after dropping herself into the raging river below, Cheryl was forced to use Sonia's ring to at least temporarily give her back her psychokinesis. And it turned out to be a very short temporary, so she needed to reawaken her actual powers. All of this was backed by the show's opening as an insert song, and can I just say this was more hype than some recent pre-Cure season finales? Moved by their Lear's performance, the rest of Milky Holmes also got back their toys and took care of the simps. However, the e-girl herself still had her own desires to fulfill, and after a quick wardrobe change, the final fight was underway. And with that, we'll just roll into the final episode of the season, as there's not a whole lot to analyze, as a good chunk of this episode is just an extended fight scene between Milky Holmes and Arsene. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially in this case, where all I can really say is that it looks amazing. As while the previous episode had relatively limited animation, it was clear that they just wanted to go all out for this finale, even bringing in some very talented animators, including Toshiyuki Sato, Masao Okubo, and Takashi Tori. The former two have done a lot of work for places like Madhouse, including a certain show about some dude who can punch pretty hard. And the last guy is a rising talent, having done work on stuff like SAO and Kaguya-sama. As for why they had to go this hard with their action, well, as it turned out, Arsene's excitement for the return of her adversaries evolved her toys into full-on reality warping. Well, I'll take this old P-Witch over Wanda any day of the week. I mean, at least they actually acknowledge that she's a villain. Moreover, it was balanced out with Milky Holmes, in particular Cheryl, also evolving their toys. Really, all I can say when a fight is this good is just recommend you check it out for yourself. Because honestly, this is not only one of the best of this series, but also one of my personal favorite magical girl battles of all time, just for the pure non-stop energy behind it all. But anyway, their fight eventually went full JoJo battle tendency, as they soon found themselves floating in space. Thus, before they likely ran out of oxygen, they went in for a final one-on-one between Cheryl and Arsene, where the latter's secret identity was busted by her bust. Yeah, another reason we're not showing a whole lot of this episode is because we probably get demonetized if we showed a good chunk of it. But yeah, they figured out she was Henriette thanks to her one defining character trait, forcing the thief to just call it quits and drop a meteor on all of them because that makes sense. They then tried to pull a classic, heart-wrenching anime conclusion, with them all falling back to Earth, which, with this show, you know it's mostly just there for parody, so you shouldn't really take that seriously. Anyway, they appropriately fell near the Holmes Academy, but the impact seemed to very conveniently make them forget everything from their final battle, including Arsene's true identity. Like, that's just some next level Kodaka in terms of convenient amnesia, but I guess there is gonna be a second season, so gotta reset that there status quo, and also have them not figure out that she's Henriette through just a little mud. With that though, Arsene admitted defeat and agreed to return Henriette to them, as she had completed her main goal of restoring Milky Holmes to their former glory. Or so she thought.
Well, here we go again.
However, after one more callback to the first episode, Milky Holmes discovered that their attic room had been restored, and the postponing of their expulsion had been reset until they got their toys back for reals this time. And with that, we ended this first season on a post-credit scene with a last-minute new character transferring to the academy who was named... Moriarty. You know, every so often, you just want to enjoy a stupid, fun little anime finale like this, and these last two episodes really did a great job at exemplifying everything about this series. Quirky yet likable characters who you both root for all of their successes, and yet also laugh at all of their failures, as they at least kind of deserve it for their dame incompetence. And even putting all of that aside, this is still a well put together finale, as they did include a lot of callbacks that do make you appreciate everything they accomplished over this first season, which is what a season finale should do. Needless to say, Milky Holmes, and especially this first season, isn't something you go into expecting a deep and fleshed out story. It's generally dumb entertainment with a whole factory's worth of cheesecake, and yet it's still engaging and does at least have some interesting plot threads, most notably, of course, the characters. The title detectives themselves are a ton of fun, especially when they got back their toys during this finale, but even when they were constantly screwing up, they did at least try to help others. In turn, their arch nemesis in Arsene became the most interesting character when she was the one constantly pushing for them to get better. Her frustrations and pleasure when it came to Milky Holmes' up and down journey aren't easy to understand, especially when they have such great payoffs like this grand finale. It's the kind of over-the-top yet creative action that I love to see in my shows. And in the context that we only really got here thanks to the many good deeds that the detectives did over the course of the series, just made it all the more rewarding. Thus, even them resetting the status quo by the end felt appropriate because them constantly screwing up, yet picking themselves up, is pretty much what defines this series and franchise. In fact, when they divert from this pattern, they do kind of fall off, especially in popularity, but that's talk for another day. Overall, this is a pretty great finale to a fun first season that would only get better once we started to go full throttle in the second. Milky Holmes' battle for justice and food scraps will never truly end. That said, we are probably gonna put this series on hold for a little while. Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't quite get the numbers we wanted for this series, so we're just gonna move on to a different franchise next time. Don't worry, these magical girl detectives will return one day when the time is right. For now, though, there is a franchise that we have been asked to take a look at, and is something we do want to talk about since it is starting to gain traction here in the States. So look forward to it. Until then, though, for now, my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I'm just gonna go practice my sunrise stance. And no, we're not gonna cover Gundam series or Yu-Gi-Oh! You'll see what it is.